Tina, can you see me? Oh, there we go. Right, log on.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it's 7 o'clock. If I may, I would go ahead and read the instructions for public comment, if that's all right with you.
Yes, yes, Steve.
Right. This is a Zoom meeting, and welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting. We've been doing Zoom meetings now for a little bit, but for public comment, I just want to review how public comment is taken. There are 4 ways to submit public comment during the meeting. The first way is as an attendee. You may raise your hand during the time, and one of the hosts will acknowledge your hand being raised, will unmute you, and you will be allowed to make public comment. At that time, please state your name and address for the record. I would say we had a little bit of problem last Thursday, so if you raise your hand, make sure that you just stand up. Do not try to push it again, and we'll try to track who's raising their hand and make sure everybody gets recognized. For those who are also attendees that may have called in and have not logged in through the web, you can send public comment to public comment, all spelled out, public comment spelled out at Newtown Township spelled out.org. Again, that's public comment at Newtown Township. All of that spelled out .org. There's no spaces between public and comment, and no space between Newtown and Township. Again, if you are doing that, you need to indicate the phone number that you've called in on so that we can unmute you so that we know that you wish to speak. If you have if you're an attendee and you wish to just make public comment through sending an email, you may do that as well. Again, that's to public comment at newtowntownship.org. You must include your full name, and I say full name, first and last name, and your address. That is being monitored. I will tell you that we have just checked it a few minutes ago. There is no new public comment in the box at this time. We've retrieved everything up to this point. If you're unable to access us online for any reason, you also may drop off public comment at the drop box located at the Township building. We checked that just prior to the meeting. We checked it about 15 minutes ago. There was no comment in there at that time. Mr. Chairman, those are the instructions related to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Neese. I do want to state that the board was in executive session prior to this meeting to discuss a personnel matter. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask Mr. Neese to please call the roll.
Mr. Nawn.
Present.
Mr. Partridge.
Here.
Ms. Roberts Lightcap.
Here.
Mr. Russo.
Here.
Mr. Altieri.
Here.
Your solicitor, and I believe I saw your engineer. Yep, your solicitor, engineer, and manager are here.
Thank you, Mr. Neese. At this time, I'd ask us all to please bow our head and have a moment of silence, please. Tonight, let's keep in our thoughts and our prayers our frontline workers, those medical workers, the doctors, our first responders, everybody who's still on the front line of this terrible pandemic. Let us hope that through this and hope that they stay safe and continue to be able to provide the care that they provide for us. All right, thank you. We have before this evening's agenda. I would like to make one change to the agenda, and I'll offer that as a motion. I would like to move the new business section, items 18.1 through 18.5. I'd like to move that up ahead of item 17, the curative amendment hearing. Just I would anticipate that curative amendment hearing may take a long time. And anybody waiting around for the new business, I would prefer that we get that out of the way first so we can end with the curative amendment. So that is my motion for this evening agenda. I'll entertain any seconds.
Second.
Motion was seconded by Supervisor Partridge. Any further questions, discussion from members of the board on this? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. At this time, we have public comment for the agenda items only. Now, let me clarify that a little bit. We are not taking public comment on the curative amendment. That's part of a hearing that is recorded. So that will, if you have additional comment for that, we will wait at that time. If anybody has any other comment on any other item on the agenda, not off the agenda, but on the agenda, now would be the time to either raise your hand, send an email, or whatever the many ways we have of commenting. I see, according to my screen, I see two hands there, Mr. Neese.
Yep.
Okay, if we could take, I believe it's Kim Shakakian first. Need to unmute, Kim. Their microphone's still muted. Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Oh, I am sorry. I raised my hand at the wrong time. I am very new at this.
Okay,
I apologize. I'm sorry.
so you have no comment at this time?
No, no.
Okay. Joe Silk has his hand up. We could let Joe talk, maybe. Joe. Hello, Joe.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
You guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Can you state your name and address, please, for the record?
Joe Silk. I live at 19 Clearbrook Road.
Okay.
I'm calling or just making a comment to address new business item 18.3 about a twin culvert that's being replaced on Clearbrook Road. My concern is that that culvert is directly in my front yard, and what's there now is a stone wall that goes under, the drainage under Clearbrook Road, and it is crumbling. So I'm happy that it's being addressed. However, I wrote a letter. I'm concerned that what it will be replaced with is a large stone precast concrete structure that will be put in my front yard. And having to look at that, I'd rather have something that's more aesthetically pleasing that fits sort of the landscape that's in the surrounding area. We've invested a lot in our property, and replacing that with a large concrete structure that was put on Poplar Road, if that's anything similar. I'm just trying to see what options we have to have a say in what is replaced with, being it's directly in my front yard.
Thank you, Joe. We are aware of your concerns, and we will address them when we get to that agenda item. So thank you. I see no other public comment at this time, so we are going to move on with the agenda. We had in our packets the minutes from the May 11th, 2020 meeting. I'll entertain a motion from a board member accordingly, or consideration of any changes, additions, things like that.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from May 11th, 2020.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Supervisor Altieri, seconded by Supervisor Roberts Lightcap to approve the minutes from the May 11th, 2020 meeting as written. Any further questions or discussions from members of the board? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next on the agenda, item 9, we're going to have a presentation from our codes department. So I will turn it over to Mr. Neese or Mr. Reczek or whoever is going to entertain us.
I've just promoted Andrew, I believe this is Andrew, over to do the presentation. Andrew, I hope this is you that I brought over. You need to unmute yourself.
All right, am I there?
You are here.
I apologize for the holdup, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to just spend some time with you this evening. I just kind of wanted to give everyone an update on what the code department has been dealing with over the last several months. Most of the commercial projects that are ongoing that everyone's aware of, AmeriHealth, the Porsche project, Culberson Elementary School, they're all moving along without any real significant problems. We're still doing all the inspections at the Stack Townhome development on Charles Ellis. Here again, not any really significant problems, just normal code enforcement type activities. Recently, we've issued permits to what was the old hotspot project. It's now going to be a Chase Bank. Dunwoody, their project is under review currently. And we've recently issued the project at 3604, Mr. Sabersky's project, which is going to be a new commercial office building along Westchester Pike. The rental program during the Corona's stay-at-home order, we kind of put the rental program on hold temporarily. I had Zach contact all of the folks that we had scheduled and push them back into June with anticipating that hopefully we would be opened up by now, and that seems to have worked. So we do have some of the rental program inspections scheduled, and now he'll be working on, addressing all the other ones for the rest of the year, so we can continue along with that program. Property maintenance, of course, we're always dealing with that. This is a busy time of year for property maintenance type issues. I'm certainly glad to have Zach. He was out for the last 2 weeks because there was somewhat of a scare. He had someone in his family had come in contact with someone who had tested positive for corona. So he did have to stay at home for a couple of weeks until it was safe for him to come back into work, but he's now back. We're tackling property maintenance and all those issues. The one caveat to that is that once we get through the normal notification process, we are somewhat at a standstill if there's not necessarily compliance, simply because the courts have been closed, and I haven't heard when they would reopen. So that is still a potential hurdle. But at this point in time, I don't think we have anybody that's been non-compliant. We've had people or property owners in the pipeline that we've been addressing, but nothing recent that hasn't already been before district court. And then, of course, we have 2 board members that sit on the rewrite committee, so I'm sure you all are fully aware of what's happening there. We've been meeting almost weekly, at least bi-monthly, to continue that process, and it seems to be getting some traction now. I think we're making some headway in redefining the use groups in each zoning district, and hopefully we'll be wrapping major chapters of that up in the next couple weeks, and hopefully we can present something to the whole board. But that's pretty much all I had. I just wanted to I thank you for the time, but also be available to answer any questions that any of you may have.
Andy, could you just kind of for the public, can you just explain what Zach does, specifically what his title is, and with regard to inspections on these larger projects, exactly how that works, and that there is an escrow for these inspections that is charged back to these developers. Can you just give us a quick overview of your department? Just
Sure.
A bird's eye, a space view, so to speak. So if you could,
Sure.
appreciate it.
30,000 square foot view?
Thank you. I couldn't think of it. Brain's a little slow.
Well, starting with Zach. Zach was hired as our property maintenance inspector. So primarily his responsibilities are to, at the end of every year, we send the rental application out to all properties that we've identified and that have enrolled in the rental program. So when those applications begin to come in, he primarily will review those applications, identify whether or not they need inspection. Because if you recall, we kind of set it up on a 5-year basis. So we would not be hitting a property, every year. It would be really once every 5 years. Or individual dwelling units or rental units, we would only physically inspect those at a period of every 5 years. Now there's, in between those years, there's some self-inspection if there were a tenant change or something similar. So his primary duty is to work within that rental program ordinance and to make sure that he's documenting, scheduling, and performing those inspections. Now, the inspections are we don't charge an additional fee. The fee with the applicant, there's an application fee, and then there is a rental inspection fee. And I believe it, Steve, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's $35 for the inspection. And that covers the initial inspection and what may need to be a subsequent inspection. In the event someone had a problem that was recognized, we would essentially come back out, or he would go back out to make sure that that problem was resolved. So that's his primary focus. Secondary focus is obviously the complaints, any type of issue that comes up, things that are dealt with directly out of the property maintenance code. So we get complaints through the website, through everyday phone calls, and sometimes we even get them through email letters. So he goes out, investigates that. A lot of times we need to discuss whether or not it meets the certain thresholds, and then if it does, he acts upon it in accordance with that code, with the property maintenance code. Kathy, of course, she does most of the clerical, she has all the clerical responsibilities. She does all the scheduling and meeting preparation for our planning commission and our zoning hearing board. Very active in the GIS and the website, does a lot with that. And then my responsibilities are primarily to do the inspections, act as a zoning officer, and mainly I'm still doing most of all of the commercial inspections. I do all of the plan review. Of course, we still have BIU that assists us in the residential inspection process. And that's generally my responsibilities. And you had mentioned about an escrow. The escrow is not directly related to the code department. That's more of an engineering issue and primarily attached to projects that require stormwater management and land development oversight. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, Andy. Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Hey, Andy, because I'm sure everyone is excited to see another bank come in here. When is that Chase Bank expected to be finalized over at the hotspot?
Well, the permit was issued. Actually, they had a demolition permit for about a month, and for whatever reason, they didn't want to act on it until they had their full building permit. So that building permit went out about a week ago. So I would suspect that you're going to see that building come down very shortly, and then the major construction activity start shortly thereafter. Most of my days are spent heavily at the AmeriHealth project. The stacked townhomes takes an awful lot of time. They're very active. They generally have several inspections a week. And sometimes those inspections can last quite some time. There's days when I'm in AmeriHealth for it. Unfortunately, sometimes it's an hour and a half to 2 hours. That takes some time as well. But like I said, most of it is going pretty well without any major issues. It's a lot of making sure they follow up and do the things that we're pointing out that have to be done.
Any other board members, any questions for Andy? Thank you very much, Andy. I appreciate your efforts, and hopefully you'll keep up the good work and we can get all through this COVID thing and we can start, we have to enforcing our codes and taking people to court.
Jeez.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you folks for a little while.
I do notice on my screen there is one hand up from a person named Dennis. As I don't recognize that name, we are not taking comments right now or questions for Andy. If you have a question regarding anything on the agenda not related to the curative amendment or any other issue, we can talk about that at the end of the meeting when there's another period for public comment. So you can lower your hand and we'll get back to you and raise it again when we get to the end of the meeting. We're going to move on to item 10 on the agenda, reports. I'm going to call out your name. I'm assuming you have nothing to add. If you do have something to add, I guess raise your hand. We'll recognize you and you can supplement your report if you feel you need to. Nonetheless, in our packets and available for everybody to read, we have reports from our police chief, Chris Lunn. We have a report from our fire department, Chief Doug Everlof. We have a report from our public works director, George Sharretts. We have a report from Manager Reczek, our code enforcement person we just heard from. We have a report from our finance manager, Rich Lafayette, and a report from our library director, Arlene Caruso. I don't see any of those folks who have their hand up. So I'm assuming I have nothing to add. I'll ask any board members, do you have any questions for any of those folks before we get on to our engineer?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have a question, but I do just want to highlight something that was in the report filed by the fire chief, Doug Everlof. Just two things I want to highlight because I think it really goes to the sense of community that I sort of spoke about 2 weeks ago and something that the firehouse has been really good at. If you look at the back page of his report, special events parade, and this is really just something for public consumption as well, that during this entire coronavirus, the fire company has responded to 37 requests for birthday and or anniversary parades in the town. The fire company has created a form on their website, www.nsfc.org, for residents to request a drive-by for a parade. So, I think that all of us have heard the sirens going around, and then we see the comments on social media asking if everything's okay. And thankfully, it's majority of the time, it's good things. It's people celebrating wedding anniversaries, first birthdays, so on and so forth. So, I just wanted to give them a shout out for that. And then also to highlight, again, speaking of sense of community that the fire company and the great services that they do, the 2020 fund drive, obviously volunteers are down. They can always use volunteers, but they also need help financially. And the one fact that they had in here is that only 57% of the residents and 10% of the businesses support the fire company fund drive each year. And I just want to say that, while it's 57% of residents and 10% of businesses, the fire company will support us 100% when we need them. And I just want to kind of give them a plug that you can also donate to the fire company online, again, by going to nsfc.org. So thank you very much.
Well said, Mr. Altieri. I'll also add that as the liaison to the fire company, myself and Mr. Neese did have our quarterly meeting with the chief and the president of the fire company via Zoom, of course, between our last meeting and this meeting. And so we are continuing to meet with them, continuing to make sure that everything is going the way it's supposed to be. And once we're out of this current pandemic, I do expect that we will have some type of opening in housing for the brand new fire company, which is near completion at this point. So anybody else have anything for those individuals that I already named? If not, we're going to move on to our report from our engineer. Again, a report is attached. Does anybody have any questions for our engineer regarding her report? Eileen, if you're on, do you have anything to add?
Just a few kind of minor updates with respect to the Public Works garage and infiltration bed. We did get the as-built survey field work completed today. That should help us resolve the remaining punch list items and do the notice of termination for the NPDES permit that was obtained for the construction of the Public Works garage. And with respect to the road program, I did forward copies of the contractor schedule to all the supervisors today. It is also on the website for the public.
Fantastic. So if you are listening and do want to know when your road is going to be done, if it's going to be done this year, the entire road program schedule is up on the website. Obviously, that's going to be updated on a regular basis. It is weather dependent to some extent. So please don't, call on a Monday morning when it says your road's supposed to be doing, if your road's not being done. But understanding the fluidity of it is generally what's going to happen. So please check that out when you have a chance. Any other board members, any questions for Eileen?
Yes, I do. Eileen, can you give us an update on where we are with Toll Brothers and the parking lot for the trail?
Yes, they had, we met and discussed them creating a berm along the entire back of the property to contain any runoff coming from their site. Discussions following that were that they need access to be able to provide the material to construct the berm. And through discussions this afternoon with both Steve Neese and George Sharretts, we determined that provided they provide a good stone base, they can utilize the Goshen parking lot to gain that access and clean that all up.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Any other board members have questions for our engineer? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the report of our manager, Mr. Neese. Mr. Neese, I believe you have a report for us?
Yes, hopefully fairly short, but I do have a couple items that I just want to bring up and a couple, hopefully some clarifications from the board. You asked me to come back with a suggested plan for the strategic plan update. Mr. Chairman and I have put something together. I have determined with the help of Anita Bork, who has helped us with the strategic plan. She was the chair of the strategic plan committee. We've talked and we believe that the best way going forward looking at this would be to break the board and the staff and provide assistance from the strategic plan group to two different groups, tackle each directive, come back together and try to come up with the final goals that we'll do to do those directives. We believe that will probably, I think, as I mentioned last time, probably take like an evening and then a full day. I apologize, our lights just went out.
We can still see you.
Excuse me.
Has left the earth.
Yeah, we don't move enough here, I guess. So as I think, as I mentioned last time, it would probably be, something we consider doing like a Friday night, Saturday, or figuring that out maybe if the board wants to do something a little different. The schedule would run one evening, we would do kind of an overview of the project, of the plan itself, talking about the comments that the public made, just so the board would be familiar with all the comments that were made, not necessarily going over every comment, but the grouping of comments so that there would be a good understanding. And then we would break into the two groups and spend about an hour together looking at goals to achieve over the next 5 years, come back and put the two groups' goals together, come up with what the final is, and then move on to the next directive. We need to do that 5 times because there's 5 directives. We've really looked at this and we talked about it. We think the best way, obviously, to do that would be in person. And we think there's some challenges, obviously, right now to do that. I've looked at the building here and we can't make it happen in the boardroom and break into 2 groups and keep the 6 feet difference, 6 feet apart. So I'm reaching out to a couple other venues just to see if we can find a space that might work. And then we would schedule that in the coming weeks to do that. But that would be the idea, Mr. Chairman, unless the board would come back and tell me they would prefer to do something different.
I think that works. Aside from the challenges that we all have to deal with right now, I think that's a well laid out plan in order to get this advanced and wrapped up. Any other comments from board members? Looks like we're good, Mr. Neese.
Okay, great. I'll continue to move forward and continue to update the board as to where we are, and hopefully we'll have a venue that will work. If we can't, then we'll do it via Zoom. The two other things I have, one is on the road program. One of the projects that we had in the road program was doing bike lanes all the way down Campus Boulevard, across Campus Boulevard, down Stony Brook, down around. They don't go around the circle because you can't have bike lanes in a circle, but on the other side of the circle, they would pick back up on Troop Farm Road and go down all the way to 252. One of the things that's come to our attention in the process there is that we have some homes that actually front Stony Brook Boulevard. And if we put a bike lane in, it would eliminate any parking. We would have to have no parking. You can't have parking and a bike lane. So one of the questions that came up and one of the suggestions that we had was that one would be to eliminate the Stony Brook Boulevard piece of the bike lanes completely, or because there's no homes on what would be the west side until you're pretty far down, we could do that and have the lane just kind of die and end as it's a little bit before it goes into the circle. And we could also have a lane coming out of the circle until it gets to, and I always get this wrong, it's not Wisteria, it's, I forget what the other road is there, and I apologize. I see it in my brain, but Wilshire, Wilshire there. We could take it to Wilshire and then have it stop after that. So, but we thought that it would be good for the board to weigh in, obviously, because we had originally talked about putting it in the whole way, but if we're not going to do that, I just would like some feedback of what the board would like to see.
So just so I can understand this, what the one solution is to have no parking, and the other solution, how did you have that? How did you have that bike lane go?
I guess there's three potential solutions. The one solution would be that you would put no parking so that the residents would not be able to park out on the street. They'd have to park in their driveways.
And this is just that section from the circle to Campus Boulevard. We're talking that part of Stony Brook?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. The second option would be where there are no homes, particularly where there's a long section and there's no homes, and there is on the west side where it's kind of the backside or the side of Hunter's Run.
Yeah.
Comes down, you have that long area there. We could run a bike lane down that way, and then as it gets in front of the houses, just have the bike lane stop. Whatever the protocol is, there's ways to end bike lanes like that, and you do that. And then same thing, just on that section coming out of the circle till you get to Wilshire. And then the third option would be to not have bike lanes on either side at all in that section.
So I don't like option 3 at all. Option 2, I mean, option 1, I don't know if I really like that one either. Let me ask you this, because how, I know, because you said there's ways that, you know, the proper way that bikers stop the lane. So there still would be a lane from Kansas Boulevard all the way to 252. It's just that section somehow, right when it gets to the circle, would essentially break. That's basically what would happen with option 2.
With option 2, there would be 2 breaks. There would be one right before you got to the circle if you're headed
towards 252.
Down. If you're headed towards 252, there's 2 homes or 3 homes, I guess you would say, are right along that edge there as you're going into the circle. So it would have to die before that. Then on the other side of the street going the other direction, as you come out of the circle, there's a short distance from the circle to Wilshire. And then once you pass Wilshire, I believe it's 6 or 7 homes that go all the way to the end. And so we would just not have a lane in front of those homes. It would be there as you're coming out. So the idea of it would be there, but if you put the lane in, then we can't allow parking.
So I guess it's option 2, because you still can have the bike lane.
Right.
That theoretically it breaks.
Yeah, I personally think option 2 is the way to go unless we feel that we don't need parking on that side of the street. I mean, very rarely I've ever seen a car actually park there. I don't want to encumber residents that may live there, but I think if we do option 2 and we find out that nobody parks there anyhow, and we do have a great demand for the bike lane, I guess we could always then restrict the parking and finish painting the bike lane in between those two endpoints and just complete the trail altogether.
It's interesting because just as we got this, it was the first time I saw a car parked there, and there's actually been a car now parked there for about a week and a half. I believe somebody had their driveway done, sealed. And so therefore they were parking out there, which kind of cracked me up. And so it was like one of those things where it became very apparent that we said, oh, no one ever does that. And all of a sudden they did.
Go ahead,
John,
Tina.
can I ask you a question? Because you're a traffic engineer as of other things. The bike lanes tend to slow traffic down though, don't they? It's a visual when you have bike lanes painted.
It is a visual to the driver to some extent. So yes, they recognize and understand that bikes would be present. And even though we don't have it where the cars are parked, they're going to assume that bikes are going to pull out around the parked cars into the lane of traffic, which they're allowed to do, and then pick up the bike lane again.
Because Stony Brook we've had complaints about the traffic and the
Yes.
speed through there, correct?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. We have even run our little speed device through there a few times, I think. I would, again, if we get a lot of bikes there, maybe that would have an impact of slowing the traffic down and maybe even causing some drivers to go try to drive somewhere else.
Okay. Is there a way to survey the neighbors there?
Well, that's what I thought, at least, approaching the circle from Campus Boulevard, there's only 2 or 3 houses that are there.
Yes.
And we're not going to be able to stripe it through the circle anyhow, because we don't have a way to continue bike lanes through roundabouts. But, again, if we painted it and we found out that there's never any cars parked there other than when they're redoing your driveways, then maybe that's an opportunity where we do consider a no parking restrictions there and then just fully painting it right to the circle. And we could do the same on the other side too. So I think if we at least get it partially painted, if you will,
Mhm.
and then if we find that there's a need to continue that, we look out and every day or every weekend there's 20 and 30 and 40 bikes using this thing, well, then maybe we have to consider, going the next step, I think.
Okay, I agree with option 2 then for now.
Everybody else good with option 2?
All right.
Yes.
Thank you for your direction. The last thing I have, John and I did meet with the fire company. I think it was about a week and a half ago or so. One of the things that has come up is that, I've shared this with you during budget time. We've talked about replacing the ladder truck, and it became clear the cost to rehab the ladder truck is almost cost prohibitive for the benefit that you get. You don't get the full life again out of it. We thought we were looking at something between 200,000 and 500,000, and I think the number came in, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but closer to 800 or 900,000. It was ridiculous. And I mean, a brand new truck is about 1.5, just to put it in perspective. So we were talking, and John brought up the idea that maybe we should look into, because we got such a good deal on the financing that we did earlier, about a month ago, was to look into that. We did check and found that we did find that there are some dollars still out there that we could borrow if we go through Del Val Financing Authority. The thing that Rich and I are not sure about, and we're working on this, and we would bring this back to you at the next meeting if you're interested, and we'll pursue more. We're not really sure where we would be set as a township to be making payments on 3 different loans right now. And so it is something that we had talked about. It is something that we were thinking about. We just haven't figured out with the budget challenges that we're having going into 2021, how we would do that and where we would be on the other side of that. So we're still working on that. I just wanted you to know, unless the board tells us direction, hold, stop, we're not interested at all, we'll continue to look. My understanding when we talked to Doug, it would probably take 9 months, potentially a year, to even get a truck built. He was going to look and see if he could find something that was maybe not purchased because of all the downturn, and somebody, kind of backed out of something that was planned. So they're going to look at that and see if there's not an option there. But I just wanted you to know that we were working on that.
Yeah, let me just add, I know we're spending a lot of money lately, but I'm still amazed at the attractive interest rates that we're able to get in the neighborhood of 1% and less. So it seemed to me it was at least worth investigating rather than buying a new truck in 2022, 2023 and paying 8, 9, 10% interest. Maybe now is the time to at least commit to a new truck and pay, 0.8% interest or 1% interest and save the township a whole bunch of money over the long run, if in fact it was financially viable for the township to do that now. So that's what I'd asked Steve to at least start taking a look at that, knowing that we could kick that around at this meeting if anybody had a feeling one way or the other.
And John or Steve, just so the members of the public who don't know this, we actually buy the machines now, or the trucks now, correct? And essentially lease them to the fire company to kind of help them out.
So in the past, the fire companies actually purchased their own equipment. But one of the challenges they've had is that as they've continued to do fundraising, it's continued to become less, in what they're bringing in, and the cost of equipment is getting prohibitive. A lot of communities, the municipality buys the trucks, and then the fire company takes care of the rest. Like, if there's additional hoses and things like that that need to be put on, or whatever the equipment fits in the boxes, that's them. So we have been talking, I guess, for the last probably about 3 or 4 years, I think, John, right, about the concept, and we brought this up and we've talked about it during the budget process, about the concept of the township actually starting to purchase the equipment, particularly since the fire company has built the new station. It's going to be more of a challenge for them to do both. And so this would open up and help them financially. And at the same time, long-term down the road, and I don't know that it would be during this truck life cycle, but, what we're seeing is less and less volunteer fire companies. And so this way, one of the charters that a second-class township, or one of the responsibilities a second-class township has, is to provide fire service. This would give us the ability to make sure we at least have the equipment to do so if something happened to our volunteer fire company.
Right. We've discussed this at great length before because of the dwindling volunteerism that's occurring and the inability of most fire companies to get sufficient volunteers, that if in fact our fire company was to essentially go out of business, not that we would ever want that to happen, and we try to do everything we can to keep them going. But if that was to happen, I mean, everyone needs to understand, fire company is not a department, division, part of Newtown Township. They are their own independent, if you will, corporation. If they go out of business tomorrow, nothing says that they have to continue to fight fires in Newtown, give us the equipment or anything like that. So one way of the township financing the trucks going forward is that if the fire company itself goes away, at least the township then has equipment, so that if we have to actually start a fire company, pick up the ball, if you will, hire firemen, we don't have to actually go out and buy firefighting apparatus too. Might need to buy a firehouse since we don't own the firehouse, but that's a different story.
One of the other things too that we know is that it's been harder to get volunteers, and if one of the requirements of the state for the volunteers is pretty significant, the amount of training that they have to do, and so it really has cut into the amount of time that they can do fundraising, and so this is kind of helping to make sure that we are supporting our volunteers who are there, because it's still a huge savings if we look at what it would cost. You could look at our police budget and just assume whatever that is, that's what it would be, at least that much to have a fire company.
Right. It's about 100 hours of training for any firefighter to get their firefighter one certification, and that's just the minimum you need just to be able to ride a truck and fight a fire. So it's not just volunteering it for the fire company. There's a large commitment that goes along with that, apparently. So any other questions regarding that? Mr. Neese, I do have a question with your report. Sorry, after you've put your mask on. Parks, we were going to discuss that at this meeting, the reopening, or is that the next meeting?
It's at the next meeting. We were going to discuss it at the June 4th meeting with the Parks and Rec group.
Right, okay.
And then the board meets, I believe, on the 8th,
Yes.
that Monday. We would discuss finalizing everything at that time, what we're going to do. I suspect with what I'm hearing, the governor has intentions of moving all counties to yellow by June 5th. And so we will look at what it will take to start opening some of those parks. What I think we've talked about is doing kind of a phased opening, potentially taking our 2 largest parks, opening those first and being able to see how we can watch and make sure that we keep those safe. The biggest thing is just any decision of any equipment that we want to keep out of use. We just need to make sure we know what that is ahead of time so we can make sure we properly secure it.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Neese?
Yeah, so Steve, this is Ed. Just backing up to the strategic plan meetings.
Yes.
I know you said you're going to look at venues. I just want to, not to get in any further discussion tonight, but just want to say I certainly have a concern in the near future with the in-person versus Zoom meetings. So I don't know what the timing that you're looking at here, but I just want to throw that out there and we can discuss it, later when you, have some more information.
Yeah.
But I do have a concern about I think in the near future, I'd be more in favor of a Zoom as opposed to in person, but just a comment at this point, and we can discuss more later.
I would just mention to the entire board, that's a high concern for me as well. I think, I've kind of approached all of this with a pretty conservative view in wanting to make sure that people stay protected. And the only way that I would see doing this is if we had really a pretty large space that we could do it and it seemed like it would work. But yes, that's my concern, and that's why I don't have anything before you tonight.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
All right, we're going to move on now. Item 11, appointment of boards and commissions. We're going to consider appointing Joseph Pinto to the 3-year term on the Environmental Advisory Commission expiring December 31st, 2022. Does anybody want to offer a motion to get this on the table for discussion?
I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Joseph Pinto to the 3-year open term on the Environmental Advisory Commission expiring December 31st, 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Supervisor Russo, seconded by Supervisor Altieri. Joseph Pinto to a 3-year term on Environmental Advisory Commission expiring December 31st, 2022. Mr. Neese, as I understand it, this is we have one vacancy on the EAC at this point.
I'm sorry, say that again, Mr. Chairman.
We had one vacancy on the EAC. Is
That's
that
correct?
And Mr. Pinto is filling that remaining vacancy?
That's correct.
Okay. Any further questions or discussions from members of the board on this appointment?
The only thing I'll say, since I interviewed Mr. Pinto with Supervisor Russo, is that Mr. Pinto is a professional in this area. He has a master's in environmental protection from St. Joseph's University. He works in the field. He's been involved, obviously, in the field outside of his professional career. So I think it's a great asset that we're getting a professional to serve on this board.
Well said.
In addition to the already great professionals we have on there.
Any other comments from any of the board members? Seeing none, motion was made and seconded. All those in favor of the motion to appoint Mr. Pinto to the 3-year term, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next on the agenda is item 12, a budget adjustment. This is consider approving a budget transfer 2020-01. This is going to transfer in the general fund budget as follows. It's going to increase our account for contracted cleaning service by $2,000 from our facility hourly part-time account. The contracted cleaning services were not budgeted in 2020 due to the anticipated hire of a part-time custodian. The new hire has been postponed. Therefore, the contract cleaning service are being used on a limited basis.
So move for approval, John.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Roberts Lightcap to approve budget adjustment 12.1. Any further questions or discussions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next on the agenda, we have 3 items for payment. 13.1 and 13.2 are regarding tax assessments. We'll deal with them together. The first is consider approving a $985.18 payment to John and Michelle Gathercole at 3900 Whitestone Road for a decrease in their tax assessment. And the second is consider approving the $594.10 payment to Patrick Morrissey at 3701 Loyola Farm Road for a decrease in their tax assessment.
How are we doing this? Because the assessments that came out are not official yet. So did these people appeal their taxes before the new assessment, Steve?
That's correct. These are homes that are new homes, and several of those folks have continued to appeal. These probably were in even probably before they even knew what the new assessment was going to be.
Okay.
So moved for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Altieri to approve items 13.1 and 13.2. Any further discussions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Item 13.3 is consider approving a $714.50 escrow release payment to Jean Marie Finelli at 111 Hunt Club Lane for a completed grading project.
So move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Altieri to approve item 13.3. Questions, discussions from members of the board on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next on the agenda is item 14, the bills. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, no, there it is. Bills 14.1. Consider approving the bills on the check register dated May 26, 2020 in the amount of $164,285.97. I had the opportunity before this evening meeting to review those bills, and it is my motion that we approve said bills.
Second.
Which was seconded by Supervisor Partridge. Any questions or discussions from members of the board on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next on the item on the agenda is a land development approval. This is a continuation from our last meeting. This is consider approving the proposed 4,596 square foot addition on a 5.91 acre parcel in the R2 zoning district for the Newtown Square Presbyterian Church. I remember at our last meeting, we had discussions regarding the trail and their treatment of the sidewalks and things like that. And I believe they have corrected that, at least in the plans that I saw. So I'm going to turn this over to representatives from the church, and they can tell us where we stand.
Hello, this is Josh Weber with Chrisland Engineering.
Okay.
I believe there are other representatives from the church also, but to give just a quick update, what was changed since last time, I believe there's a letter with 4 remaining items on it. But again, it's just shy of a 4,600 square foot building addition, some sidewalk, and then revisions to the existing parking lot to the east, or to the west of the building addition, along with sidewalk and landscaping. That has all remained the same. Per our discussions at last meeting, we discussed the sidewalk and trail. So I believe the best one to take a look at would maybe be sheet 3, which would show the proposed trail that is now shown. So we have a pervious pavement trail shown from the intersection where the current ADA ramps are. That enters the site, comes up closer to the parking lot, and then meets up with the existing paved driveway. That is a 6-foot pervious bituminous pavement walking trail, so there shouldn't be any impacts to stormwater. And then from there, it continues along the existing drive. We have proposed 4-foot white line painting crossing the entrance, and then a white line that would delineate the walking trail from that point the whole way east to the roadway. Down the lower portion of the sheet, you can see the remainder of that going out to the roadway to the east. So that would delineate the trail essentially from the intersection through the site to the roadway to the east. In addition to the trail and the line paint, near the intersection, we have a signage indicating public access, essentially dawn to dusk. That is on the western side and the far eastern side of where that trail would be, to indicate the public is able to access that site. In addition to that, there are 4 parking spaces delineated along the trail. It'd be the 4 westernmost, and we have signage there indicating that there's parking for trail access there, basically Monday through Saturday, dawn to dusk, for use of residents who would want to use the trail. In addition to that, we have a 10-foot wide easement that is essentially centered on the trail from the intersection through the site along the painted lines to the eastern side of the site. I believe those are some of the items that were discussed at last meeting. So here to, I guess, gain your opinion on that proposal, address any other questions that we may have, and then request approval if so appropriate.
As far as I'm concerned, that addresses the comments that we had and the ideas brought up by Mr. Russo at the last meeting. We get a continuous trail access, I'll call it, from almost from the school over to the traffic signal there, which can get us across to our Goshen Road Trail, get us across to our future trail along 252, get us down to the Meadow Preserve, get us a nice trail connection for that neighborhood over there around and behind the school there. So I think it's a great concept. I appreciate the opportunity, your offer to allow us to have vehicles parked there. So if people need a place to park for trail access, it's a great idea. So as far as I'm concerned, you've done what we've asked you for at the last meeting, but I'm going to let other supervisors comment on that.
I agree.
Anybody
Yeah,
else?
I asked for parking, they gave me parking, so I appreciate you guys being able to work with us on that, so thank you.
Sure.
Yep.
Mike, does this generally meet what you were thinking of your suggestion at the last meeting?
I'm sorry, was that, what did you say?
Yes, it does. I think it worked. I think they did exactly what we asked. I think they did a nice job.
Fantastic. All right. Eileen, do you have anything to add? Is there anything that we're missing on this? I believe they're going to comply with any of the comments you have.
No, we just had some basic paperwork and bookkeeping items remaining beside the modification to the trail.
All right, so we're good with this.
Yes.
Anybody have anything else to add on this particular application? If not, I believe we have a resolution, which I believe Mr. Partridge has a copy of. And
Yep.
if no other questions, I'll ask Ed to read us that. Pretty much you can go from page 2 there after you read the opening. So
Yep, we'll do it, John. Okay. Resolution number 2020-22, preliminary final land development approval, Newtown Square Presbyterian Church expansion, 3600 Goshen Road, tax parcel number 300001751000. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Newtown Township hereby resolves and conditionally approves, 1, the preliminary/final plans, number 2, the following waivers and or partial waivers which must be set forth on the final recorded plans as follows. A, section 148-43B4 to allow the use of high-density polyethylene piping, HDPE, in place of RCP in the stormwater management conveyance system. B, section 148-12 to allow for submission of preliminary/final plans, and C, section 148-41 regarding recreational land requirements. Developer is not a commercial enterprise, nor is developing residential structure. Further, it provides recreational activities and facilities as a service for its congregants. 3, the Delaware County Planning Department suggested sidewalks along Goshen Road in connection with this development to connect the Goshen Road and Lissitor trails. The developers offered a trail easement that will be constructed and then dedicated to the township for public use as depicted on the plan, along with limited trail access overflow parking as depicted on the plan. This approval is contingent upon dedication of said easements and the reduction of the same to written legal descriptions and easement agreements when the final location configuration is fine-tuned and adjusted to minimize construction costs and disturbance of natural features. This trail easement is not a sidewalk and is not provided in lieu of a sidewalk, but rather is offered to satisfy improved trail access in the township. 4, such approval is subject to developer obtaining any applicable sewage planning approvals or waivers and approval from the Newtown Township Municipal Authority for sanitary sewer connection and design. 5, such approval is subject to compliance with the terms, conditions, and suggestions of the aforementioned township engineer of May 6, 2020, the representations in the Chrisland's letter offered May 7, 2020. 6, such approval is also subject to the terms and conditions outlined below. A, the developer will execute a developer agreement, financial security agreement, and stormwater management maintenance agreement, and contribute to the township stormwater maintenance fund, all to be prepared by the township solicitor. And the developer shall obtain an NPDES permit for stormwater discharge if applicable. 7, developer shall comply in all respects with all applicable township codes, ordinances, and regulations, as well as any applicable county, state, or federal regulations, and developer must obtain all applicable township, state, county, and federal permits, approvals, and or waivers. 8, preliminary/final approval is contingent upon payment of all outstanding professional fees / escrow replenishment within 45 days of approval, except as properly challenged in accordance with the municipality's planning code. 9, the township manager is authorized to execute the developer's agreement, financial security agreement, and stormwater agreement when prepared in a form acceptable to the township solicitor, township engineer, and township manager without further action of the board. Resolved this 26th day of May, 2020 at a public meeting of the Board of Supervisors, and that's my motion.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion is made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Russo to approve the preliminary final land development agreement. Before we vote, I noticed Mr. Kuchera has his hand up. Perhaps we can give him permission to speak. However that works.
I would-
You're muted too, Steve.
I'm sorry. I turned off so I wouldn't make too much noise. In order for me to let him speak, I have to move him to a panelist. I think he's coming over. It's going to take a moment.
He's there.
Yeah, he's shown as a panelist.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
And we can see it.
So yeah, James Kucera, 814 Ellis Avenue, member at Newtown Square Presbyterian and co-chair of the Growing Our Future Committee that was tagged with this project. Just on behalf of the church, we just like to thank the Board of Supervisors. Appreciate the leniency that you showed with the church.
We appreciate you working with us.
Yeah, absolutely. This creates a nice trail connection for us, and we really appreciate you doing that and being a good community partner with us. Thank you. All right, no further questions. We will vote. All those in favor of approving the preliminary final land development, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
That took care of item 16.1 for us. So I'd like to go to item 16.2, which is consider approving resolution 2020-23, adopting the 2020 fee schedule. Mr. Neese, I believe you had something you want to add to this?
Did it again. I just wanted to let the board know that there's not really changes in the fee schedule here in regards to the fees that we're charging, other than because of some language, it was brought to our attention that what we had been doing as a pattern of charging might be not exactly what was in the fee schedule as it was written. There was also some questioning about rounding, and we made that clear. And so that it matches what the system has been doing since before we changed the format of how we did the fee schedule. So that's what you're looking at. There were two items that were removed. The two items that were removed were roofing permits, which were never used because they actually fell under just a general building permit, and it was some confusion. So those two items were left off. Other than that, if you look at the fee schedule and you compare it to the others, it's really just some clarifications. It's things like we would say up to $200,000 you do this, and over 200,000 you do that. It now says up to 200,000 you do this, and it also says like up to and including 200,000. What happened if a price came in right at 200,000? There was no direction, so we clarified that piece. And the second thing was that for some of them, the way it was written, the fees from the lower amount weren't calculated the way they were calculated in the system, the way it had always been done, but there was a question that was brought to our attention. And so that's what's happened.
So it's just minor language changes, nothing so substantive, I guess I'll say.
Correct.
Would anybody like to offer a motion accordingly?
Yeah, have a resolution here.
Go for it.
Township of Newtown Resolution 2020-23, 2020 fee schedule, resolution to approve township fee schedule. Whereas from time to time, the Board of Supervisors of the Township of Newtown, Delaware County, Pennsylvania reviews and revises various fees for services provided by the township. Now therefore, in consideration of the above, the Board of Supervisors of the Township of Newtown does hereby resolve as follows. 1, the Township of Newtown's comprehensive fee schedule attached to this resolution as Exhibit A is approved. 2, the Township Administration is directed to make this fee schedule available to the public and charge fees for services consistent therewith. So resolved this 26th day of May 2020, and that's by motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Roberts Lightcat to approve resolution. Oh, I'm sorry, I lost my place here. Hold on.
2020-23.
2020-23, adopting the 2020 fee schedule. Any further questions or discussions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, that brings us to items 18, new business. We're skipping 17 right now, and we're going to come back to the public hearing. So we're moving on to new business. Item 18.1 is consider approving the permission to advertise the 2020 ordinance 2020-02, the tree ordinance. I think we've discussed it. I think we've all had a chance to review it. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Catania, if he's still with us, so he can give us a brief synopsis, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
We made the changes that the board recommended over the past 2 meetings, eliminating the hazard tree, keeping the, for now, the tree commission in there, which will be a separate commission, and some other minor changes were in it, but right now it's in the format that the board and the representative from EAC is proposing to be advertised.
And again, let me clarify for everybody, we're not voting to approve the ordinance this evening, we're simply voting to advertise the ordinance. Once it's advertised, we'll then get comments and we'll have a formal discussion at a future meeting on the finer points before we actually pass the ordinance. We just want to make sure we get it in a form that is somewhat close to what we intend to adopt or would like to adopt. Otherwise, we'd have to re-advertise again. So with that being said, I'll entertain a motion to either advertise the tree ordinance as it's presented, the draft dated 5/21/2020B, or not.
So move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Altieri to advertise ordinance 2020-02, the tree ordinance draft dated 5/21/2020-B. Any further questions or discussions from members of the board on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Mr. Neese, I assume you'll advertise that at your earliest convenience?
Actually, I'll be doing that, sending in the advertisement. And I spoke to Steve today, and it looks like Steve was indicating he'd like to have it for discussion and approval on the first meeting in June. Is that right, Steve?
Yes.
Everybody good with that?
Yes.
Good.
Fantastic. Let's do it. Get it done. It's been on our plate for a long time, and I think it's good that we're finally getting to the point where we can get this hopefully done and approved and enacted, and it'll all be better for the township. So, all right, with that, we're going to move on to item 18.2, which is consider accepting the contribution from Aqua Pennsylvania of $71,500 in lieu of repaving a portion of Gradyville Road where the new water main was installed, and $4,663 in lieu of replacing the traffic loops on Gradyville Road that were destroyed during their project, for a total contribution of $76,163. Mr. Neese, can you shed some light on this for us?
Yeah, so as part of our road program for 2020, we were going to pave Gradyville Road. And we worked with Aqua to actually get in and them to do their project before we went in and paved it, so we wouldn't tear it up right after we put a brand new paving down. And instead of having them pave just the portion that they did, since we're in paving the entire stretch between Bishop Hollow Road and 252, this would be a contribution towards that. The traffic loops, normally we would have them replace. However, we've been moving to the camera system, the video camera system. And so they're giving us the contribution of that amount to cover, and that will cover the video camera system to be put in. So that's the plan, and that's where we're moving forward if you will approve it.
So move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Motion is made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Russo to approve item 18.2 as written. Any further questions or discussions from members of the board on this item?
I do have a question. So the amount of money, that 76,000, Steve, in terms of it coming to us, does that then take out the 4,600, the 71,000? Does that get set aside purely for future, potential road issues, or is this just going into the general fund? How does that work?
No, we actually apply it to road work.
Okay.
And in this case, we had assumed some money as part of the full 2020 project. When we talked with Aqua, we knew they were doing this, and we assumed that you would do that. So that's been part of our plan. We didn't know the exact dollar amount, but this will reduce actually how much we have to take out of the capital fund to cover this.
Perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Any other questions for Mr. Neese? Motion was made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next item is 18.3. Consider approving the Clearbrook culvert replacement project to the lowest responsible bidder based on the recommendation of the township engineer, and that's contained in Stantec's letter. And this is what Mr. Silk was alluding to at the beginning of the meeting. Mr. Neese, if you will, could you summarize this for us?
So we went out and we did a bid for the project to replace the culvert that goes under Clearbook. And obviously, Mr. Silk had sent us a letter requesting that we look at whether we could do some type of facade that's a little different than the concrete facade. When it was bid out, it was bid out as just a plain concrete precast. And so what we would like to do is go back to the lowest bidder and ask them what a change order would be, and let you know what that is as one price before moving forward.
And what we had bid out was what we would typically bid out for any other culvert in the township, the standard precast head wall.
That's correct.
And what we're going to be asking the contractor to do is give us a quote on, in lieu of that, providing some type of, I'll use the term stone face. Now, we're not going to get a stone head wall, but a concrete head wall that has some type of, I'll call it faux stone face on it, correct?
That's the thoughts that I would see us doing something like that, yes.
And we don't pretend to think that this is going to be a no cost item to the township or $1. It's going to cost us a few $1,000s, we would suspect, correct?
I very rarely does somebody just throw things in for free.
All right, I guess it's better to table the award at this point until we have an idea of what that cost might be, and then we can decide at the next meeting what our course of action is, whether we can accept that, whether we don't accept that, whether we have to rebid the entire project with the new parameters in there, things like that. So we're going to table this item then, and you will get a number and get back to us at the next meeting, add this to the agenda, and we can make a decision at that point.
That's the plan.
Sounds good.
Everybody's good with that? Super.
Yes.
All right. Moving on, we have next on the agenda, consider approving the retirement request for Denise Zerka starting June 1st, 2020.
So move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Russo to approve the retirement request for Denise Zerka starting June 1st, 2020, or I should say effective June 1st, 2020. Any further questions or discussions on the motion?
Yeah, I just want to say to her, thank you for 20 years of service to the township and enjoy your retirement.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Last item under new business is consider approving the permission to advertise for the open house financial support position. Mr. Neese.
It's easy for you to say.
No.
So with Denise's retirement, I'd like to, well, I don't know that I would like to say that we didn't need a position, but we do need administrative support in the office. We're looking at moving, Denise did some things under both finance and administration, but one of the things she did was HR. I'm not looking at replacing an HR person. Our organization needs somebody to do HR, and I think we have a plan going forward how we would do that. I think we would move that under our administrative support director and move it there, with the idea then that we would go out and get a position that's more of an hourly position versus a salaried position. And because they would not have the same exposure with HR, that would make it an hourly position. And then what we're looking for then would be somebody to backfill some of the responsibilities that Suzanne does to so that she can focus on the HR pieces. And then there's the financial responsibilities that Denise was doing, have those filled. And so we've put together a new job description. I believe that was in your packet, or no, maybe it was not, I apologize. And so, but basically what we're looking at doing is having the person serve and do the administration type of things that takes putting together the minute books and things like that after the meetings. The person would pick up probably doing the municipal authority minutes that Suzanne currently does. The person would pick up doing some of the filing, particularly there's a lot of electronic filing that needs to be done of all the documents that we get in. And then on the finance side, the position is an accounts receivable position, and that's what that position is.
So move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Roberts Lightcap to approve the advertisement for the open administrative finance support position. Before we take a vote, Mr. Neese, I guess as I understand it, this is either revenue neutral at best, or maybe even it's less money than we were planning to spend this year. Is that correct?
Well, I would hope it would become, I mean, the position itself will pay less. The part that we never know is where the benefits lie out exactly. But depending, it very well could be less, but hopefully it's at least neutral.
Okay.
What happened last week? We told the public that we were doing a hiring freeze, and now we're talking about this. And I understand that Denise has decided to retire, and so now there's an opening in terms of work that needs to be done. And look, I can attest to firsthand that I think your staff is working very hard and is doing everything that they can. But is this something that's completely necessary right now? Since, like I said, 2 weeks ago we announced to the public, in light of the coronavirus and the economic times that the residents are finding themselves in, that we're trying to keep the budget as controlled as we can. Is this something that's absolutely necessary right now?
Well, the staff and I have reviewed this multiple times, and we feel that we need this support moving forward. From a financial side, we're already pushed to the max on what we're doing there, and if we take the whole section of what the HR piece is and give it to Suzanne, I've got to find some way to take some things off of Suzanne's plate, and I don't have any place to put that at this point, and that's the reason. I understand. I know what our commitment was, and I was definitely concerned about that.
Steve, my understanding based on what you said was that, I mean, it's basically the same amount of work. You're just restructuring how it gets done between the people who are doing it.
That is correct.
So it's if you don't replace this position, you're unable to get done all the tasks that you need to get done. That's my understanding. Is that correct?
That is correct. We're struggling now, and I've got people that are working, already extra hours, even just since this is, Denise has taken some of her leave balance time between now and the end of her time here. And so people are already having to do extra during that time. It'll probably take at least a month to get somebody hired, maybe 2. That's why we'd like to get the process started. And I do understand. I know what we talked about. I know we talked about not hiring. And I get that. This position is just this is just a tough area.
I don't see this as a violation of the hiring freeze. We're not adding any other personnel positions, jobs. We're simply filling the hole due to an unexpected retirement. We can't, I mean, if the office retires tomorrow, we can't say, well, we're at a hiring freeze, nothing can get done. So I understand that we need to keep going and fill at least the duties that this position was doing. And then that was my question about the budget, just making sure that it was revenue neutral, and it seems that it is. So I'm fine with it. I don't know if that answers your question, Leonard, but I don't think we're violating the letter of the hiring freeze, though.
Yeah, so just a clarification, Steve didn't actually say definitively that it was going to be budget neutral. He hoped that it would be budget neutral, but it's not definitive because of the benefits that are added in there. So I just want to clear that up there.
I think we all understand that nothing is definitive, especially when it comes to the budget. So, all right. Any other questions from members of the board on this item? Again, the motion was to approve the advertisement. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, we have one opposed, Mr. Altieri. All the rest, the ayes have it. And Mr. Nishi, you have authorization to advertise for the open administration finance support position.
Thank you.
That completes the new business. And since the large-scale power outage hasn't occurred, I guess we're going to have to go to item 17, the continuation of the February 24th, 2020 Board of Supervisors meeting, where we are considering the curative amendment requesting changes in Newtown Township zoning code, changing the current zoning of the 13 parcels from residential R3 zoning to commercial C1 zoning. Not that I need to, I think everyone's on board with what we're doing. But since this is a continuation of hearing, I guess the first question I need to ask Mr. Neese, this is being recorded. We have people that are recording this.
If you may, I'm going to move our court reporter up into the panelist.
Okay.
If I can find him on our list.
At the same time, I'd also request that you add Mr. Sikora to our panelists too, as there may be issues that come up regarding his participation, or that way he can jump in and shut me down if I need to be. So.
You should also add in Mr. Imperatrice. I think he's representing the applicant.
Yes, probably a really good idea.
Just give me one moment and let me get all of these folks brought over. And I know Rich is on here somewhere.
Yeah. You hear me?
already did him?
There
I'm
he
sorry.
is. There he is. I see Tom, I see Rich, okay,
Yep. And Mr. Imperatrice is also on.
yes. Okay, we're good?
Yep.
All right, to this point, we have heard from the applicant, we have heard from the township, we have heard from the party protestants, we have received exhibits from the township, from the applicant, obviously, and from the party protestants. All those exhibits were moved and accepted, I believe, in our last meeting. The only outstanding issue is the public comment portion of the hearing. Prior to tonight's hearing, as announced at the last meeting, the township did accept emailed comments, written comments, and we did receive 59 comments from folks wishing to talk on this particular application. For tonight's hearing, I am number one, I'm going to read a list of who we received comments from. Number two, we're going to ask each of the board members if they have reviewed those comments. We are not going to read all those comments into the record. As long as the board has reviewed them, I think we're in good shape. Following that, we will open it to anybody else. Again, anybody else who has not submitted written comments and wishes to speak, we will give you that opportunity. We do not need to hear from or wish to hear from anybody that's already submitted a written comments at this point. But anybody that did not do that, we will hear from those folks too. So at this point, I want to read the list of comments that we have received. And I will say that prior to starting reading this list, all these comments are speaking out against the curative amendment. We received actually no comments, 0 comments for anybody speaking for the curative amendment. So we have received comments from Connie Abbott at 114 Chestnut Street, Robert Atkinson at 26 Main Street, Lori Avellino. Now, no address was given. We have a couple of these where no address was given. As far as I'm concerned, those comments would not be considered, but that's up to individual board members. Michael Barlow, 101 Main Street, Brian Bell, 304 College Avenue, Lucia and Christopher Biddle, 222 Walnut Street, Ray and Judy Blair, 211 Main Street, Christine Brennan, no address given, Kim Carr, 7 Chestnut Street, Joe and Ann Campaglia, 303 Fairview Avenue, Pat Colagreco, 5 Main Street, Pat Colagreco II, 5 Main Street, Richard and Eileen Coleman, 602 Summit Avenue. Andrea Costello, 120 Main Street. Joe Costello, 120 Main Street. Andrew Coyle, 106 Main Street. Colleen Dijon, no address given. Gabe D'Alessio, 100 Chestnut Street. Anthony DePrince, 111 Locust Street. Chris and Ernie Giacomo, 607 Ellis Avenue. Deborah Ferliger, 18 Chestnut Street. Kim Green, 114 Chestnut Street. Mr. and Mrs. Arrest Giarasante, 4 Chestnut Street. Bill and Eileen Hagerty, 27 Walnut Street. Ron and Lucy Haynes, 111 Chestnut Street. Sharon and Bill Haslett, 32 Hickory Lane. Wayne and Sandra Hocking, 599 Ellis Avenue. Matthew and Evelyn Holtzmuller on Ellis Avenue. Gail Kemble, 410 Ellis Avenue. Dan and Kristen Lopez, 37 Main Street. Christine McAndrew, 410 Ellis Avenue. Robert McGarvey, 412 Ellis Avenue. Kevin McGinnis, 28 Walnut Street. Tom and Gail McKenna, 25 Hickory Lane. Mrs. McLaughlin, 17 Main Street. William Mancy, 111 Hickory Lane. Matt and Mindy Musari, 22 Bryn Mawr Avenue. Patrick and Elizabeth O'Donnell, 402 First Avenue. Kevin and Kathleen Ostein, 400 College Avenue. Denise Pagano, 508 Summit Avenue. Diane Plouffe, 308 Fairview Avenue. Kim Rankin, 18 Hickory Lane. Christine Rhea, 224 Locust Street. Nicholas and Rachel Santorelli, 27 Hickory Lane. Dan Schultz, 122 Walnut Street. John and Diane Scott, 220 Chestnut Street. Selzer, 405 College Avenue. Kim Chai-Kian, 705 Ellis Avenue. Lawrence Silverman, 713 Elgin Road. John Sanzogni, 224 Main Street. Gerald Stank, 609 Ellis Avenue. Steve Stank, 609 Ellis Avenue. Gerald Story, 302 Fairview Avenue. Ernest and Jeanette Tremblay, 107 Mulberry Lane. Hubert Toohey, 308 College Avenue. David and Eleanor Vegso, 119 Chestnut Street. Sandy Vitale, 27 Hickory Lane. Victoria Welch, no address given. And Patty Wilson, 4111 Battles Lane. That is the list of comments that we have received, written comments, all against the proposed application. I have personally reviewed all those comments and read them, and they will be used in formulating my decision. I guess I'm going to run down the list and likewise get the same confirmation from the supervisors that they have reviewed all these comments. Supervisor Partridge, have you reviewed those comments?
Yes, I've read every comment.
Supervisor Roberts Lightcap.
Yes, I've read every comment.
Supervisor Altieri.
Yes, I have read every comment.
And Supervisor Russo.
Yes, I've read the comments.
Fantastic. At this stage, then I'm going to ask if there are anybody else that is currently in the audience that had not submitted written comments and would like to make a comment. Please raise your hand and be identified. I will again remind everybody that we are restricting our comments to a total of 3 minutes and per person, and Mr. Neese will be keeping score somehow with the 3 minutes. So
Mr. Chairman, if I can, before we start with the other public comment, we did get an email during the meeting from a Peter Kennedy.
Okay.
214 Walnut Street. And my understanding is all he said was that he was against the project or against the change.
Okay.
Okay, so noted. I noticed I have 3 hands up. The Dennis person, whoever it is, still has a hand up. I'm not sure if that's for this comment or some other comment. I also see there's a hand up from Mrs. Ferliger, but she's already submitted comments, so we're not really going to accept any more comments from her. So why don't you turn on this Dennis person, Mr. Neese, and see if we can hear what he's got to say, assuming it's for this particular matter.
We're trying to do that right now. Whoops. I believe he has to unmute himself.
Well, if he's listening, I hope he'll, it still shows as muted on the screen, so.
Yeah, it's not letting me unmute, and I think that's because he's muted. If you would allow me, I'll go ahead and I'll keep working on his, but if I can go ahead, we have one other from Nate Glazer, if I can do
Yes,
that.
why don't you pull up Nate Glazer?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, Nate, go ahead.
Excellent.
Name and address for the record.
Nathan Glazer, 3538 Cayley Road, Newtown Square. I am speaking in favor of the curative amendment. And I will address 3 specific reasons why I support it. First, I realize the negativity of the comments, and I have a pretty fair sense of where this is heading, but the process demands full hearing. First, Westchester Pike is the township's premier commercial corridor. That's fairly in evidence and indisputable. The road area will soon be a 6-lane highway, making it even less attractive to residential persons. I think it's inconceivable that people are going to pay Newtown Square real estate prices for a home facing a 6-lane highway. And I think if you look at the trend of other properties that came on the market largely by deaths of the resident on other parts of Westchester Pike, the new owners have often come in and said, please let us make this commercial because we cannot do anything else with it. And the township has largely complied with that, to my recollection. I think the residents who are fighting this just don't want to see a change, but the change is inevitable. Westchester Pike is a commercial area. It is never going to be the way it was in the 1950s or 60s when some of these people moved here. They're trying to make this area like an insect in amber from the Triassic age, that we can look at it and see it frozen in time. But that is not the way life is. All is flux, and change is inevitable. Secondly, the character of the applicant, Abe Corey, was attacked in some letters. He was referred to as a slumlord. I'm unaware that he's ever been charged with any violation, certainly nothing gross. I think this is untenable to use the public forum for such an attack. Mr. Corey is a man of good character. He is a good businessman. I'm not aware that he's ever done harm to anybody. The fact that he pursues rentals and other businesses is simply part of the American process. So I think that it's wholly unjustifiable to associate those terms. I would certainly stand with him as a testament simply to him as a township citizen, township businessman. So really, just to conclude the whole thing, I think it's a reasonable state. I think in a very short future, if it doesn't happen tonight, it will happen soon, that it will be a commercial area. I would suggest a possible compromise. I don't know if it's possible at this date even to do it, but perhaps the property that directly fronts Westchester Pike should be commercialized. Properties that face separately, that are not on Westchester Pike, might very well retain their existing residential nature. And that's a half loaf. I don't know if it even will help everybody, but I think that's the key issue, is if you front Westchester Pike, is it realistic to be a long-term resident here? And I just don't think that's going to happen. And I think this is just pushing down the lane, something that's going to be faced eventually. I did look at the township long-range plan. I could not find the specific section that said this had to stay residential. I may have missed it. It's a long document. But just to summarize, and again, not to totally repeat, I support. I think it's rational. I think it's inevitable. And I think all the people saying no are simply trying to protect their own interest based in an aged Newtown Township that doesn't exist. And they simply refuse to accept the fact that the change has already come upon us. And I'll conclude and hopefully stayed within the 3 minutes.
I was just going to stop you.
Thank you, Nate. I see a Kimberly Hughes. I do not believe that the person that submitted written comments, at least that I've read. So Mr. Neese, if you could let Miss or Mrs. Hughes be heard.
Okay, so just understand, so from what Mr. Glazer is saying, with the expansion of Westchester Pike, I too have frontage on Westchester Pike down in Florida Park. So you're going to set a precedent so that when this expansion comes, they can put a Wawa where my house is. We can change the zoning, and then all the houses along Westchester Pike and Florida Park and all Drexel Lodge will all become commercial properties. That would be the precedent that was being set here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hughes. Just let me add that Mr. Glazer's reference to the widening of Westchester Pike, it presently only extends to essentially Ellis Avenue. It does not go beyond that point. In the future, it may continue to Boot Road, but it's never going, or at least not proposed at this time, to go beyond that point. So nonetheless, your comments are well taken. Mr. Neese, any success with getting this person, Dennis, to be able to speak with us?
You're muted, Steve.
I need to unmute myself. It is in his hands. I cannot unmute him. He needs to unmute himself.
All right. Again, the only hand up is Mrs. Furliger, but we've already had her comments. So if they're seeing no other public comments, the board's had the opportunity to hear from 59 written comments, a 60th comment read by Mr. Neese this evening, and a 61st comment by Mr. Glazer. At this point, then, I would close the public comment portion of the curative amendment hearing. I believe that brings us to the point at which time the board would deliberate, unless Mr. Sikora chimes in and says we need to do something else.
John, this is Ed. I don't have any deliberation, but I have a motion.
That's fine. Well, let's
the
get
board
to,
is ready for that.
Let's see where we go first. Mr. Sikora, I'll ask you directly. Is there anything else we need to do procedurally regarding this particular curative amendment hearing?
It's actually Mr. Catania. I represent the board, but it would be, I guess, to ask Mr. Imperatrice or Mr. Sikora if there's anything else.
Mr. Imperatrice, you want to go first?
You ready for a motion?
Not
Rich?
yet, Ed, hang on.
No.
Well, this is Rich Sikora. You had the hearing. It was concluded in February. There was a time period that was extended by the applicant to make your ruling. You've heard public comment. The applicant wants his decision. He's entitled to a decision. And so at this point, from where I sit, it's time for you to rule.
Fair enough. That's what I was looking for. Just if there's anything we didn't want to get to that point and figure out we're missing something. I guess as far as I am concerned, it's personally not about what I want. It's personally, it is certainly about what's best for the township. And most importantly, as supervisors, it's important for us to properly exercise our duties within the confines of the municipality's planning code and the second-class township code. Fundamentally, on any ruling that we make on a land development matter, we have to be cognizant of public health, safety, and welfare. And we also recognize that the burden of proof in any application is on the applicant. In this case, it's my opinion that the applicant has not met that burden of proof. They have, although they have presented a case for why this may be a spot zoning perhaps challenge in their mind, that they've not fundamentally addressed the issues of, if granted, what would be the detrimental impacts to public health, safety, and welfare, if any. And without that, I know I personally can't rule in favor of this application. I feel that would be a disservice to our citizens, our constituents, without considering those important things. They've presented no testimony or reports or studies on anything regarding how this site might be used. They've not presented any type of use whatsoever. They've not taken a conservative approach to say, okay, this is the highest use that could be used under C1, and here are the ramifications. They provided nothing for us as a board to even consider making an informed decision. So as far as I'm concerned, I cannot support the approval of this application. I don't know what other board members may want to deliver.
Just a couple of things. Number one, I do, just because a couple of the comments basically were saying, why is the board even hearing this? I just want to clarify something real quick, that the municipality's planning code, which is what John just referenced a few minutes ago, is essentially the law that townships need to follow when it comes to zoning, planning, or other matters. And they require us to take action on petitions that are filed. So if we did not have a hearing on this matter under the MPC, it would be deemed as approved. So I know it might be frustrating for some people that they had to come to multiple meetings, but please know that anytime that something gets filed that we are required to take action on, if we fail to take action, if we fail to have a meeting, then it's deemed approved. So with that being cleared, I just have a few comments naturally that I want to say too. So really there's three main issues that when reviewing the testimony and the notes that I have that I noticed. The first one is, and as John sort of said, the board was never told what was going in. It's just that the petitioner wants to make this commercial. As Mr. Secor stated in his conclusions of law and finding of facts, Chapter 53 of the Pennsylvania Statute 109(16.1) requires that when a landowner challenges the validity of zoning ordinance or map, that the applicant must submit generalized plans regarding the proposed use. Specifically, subsection C1 states in pertinent part, where the landowner desires, and this is not all being quoted by him, I probably should have just ended that, but where the landowner requires to challenge the validity of such an ordinance and elects to proceed by curative amendment under section 609.1 of the MPC, their application to the governing body shall contain, in addition to the requirements of the written request hereof, the plans and explanatory materials describing the use or development proposed by the landowner in lieu of the use or development permitted by the challenged ordinance or map. Now, that is not the end all be all, however, and the Commonwealth Court has ruled in re-appeal of H&K materials that when, quote, the application does not contain such plans for review by the township, under some circumstances, oral testimony at the hearing may develop the record to fully describe the project, and plans can be later submitted to cure the defect, end quote. Now, again, reviewing the notes that I have from these hearings, that did not occur. And the Commonwealth Court has stated that in the above referenced case, when no plans are submitted and the project is not described in the record, failure to comply with section 609.1 of the MPC is considered a fatal flaw in the petition. The second issue that the petitioner raises is spot zoning or reverse spot zoning. And in my personal opinion, from the testimony, there has been absolutely zero evidence provided to this board that spot zoning or reverse spot zoning is occurring. The petitioner correctly points out in their conclusion of law in paragraph 5 that, quote, spot zoning is an unreasonable or arbitrary classification of a small parcel of land dissecting or set apart from surrounding properties, end quote, which is from Kristen's v. Zoning Hearing Board from the Commonwealth Court. They also correctly state in paragraph 6 of their conclusion of law that, quote, reverse spot zoning occurs where an island develops as a result of a municipality's failure to rezone a portion of land to bring it into conformance with similar surrounding parcels that are indistinguishable, end quote. However, again, from the petition filed, the testimony presented, and the finding of facts and conclusion of law submitted by petitioner, they have, in my opinion, misapplied indisputable facts and have failed to establish either spot zoning or reverse spot zoning. Petitioner has not established an island of differential zoning. In fact, when one looks at the subject properties, they are bounded by residential zoning on 3 sides, including to the east, which was granted a variance in settlement of the land use appeal to be used specifically as a daycare facility, which Mr. Secor properly states is more consistent with residential than commercial zoning. Finally, the last prong that I see in their petition is a valueless argument. Petitioner alleges in paragraph 7 of their finding of facts and conclusion of law that, quote, by keeping petitioner's property zoned residential, the township jeopardizes the health, safety, and welfare of its residents, as people who may reside at petitioner's property will be forced to confront the dangerous conditions along Westchester Pike, end quote. However, in paragraph 18 of Mr. Secor's finding of facts and conclusion of law, he correctly states from testimony that petitioner did not offer evidence to substantiate his testimony that increased traffic over the last 17 years has devalued the relevant properties, nor has the petitioner provided any evidence to substantiate that living along Westchester Pike is against one's health, safety, and welfare. In fact, the PennDOT traffic monitoring reports provided by petitioner during the hearing do not support petitioner's argument that substantial traffic has occurred over the past 17 years. And in fact, those same reports do show a slight decrease in traffic along Westchester Pike. Petitioner acknowledged that the subject properties are generally worth the same as they were when he purchased them. And while purchase price was introduced into the record by county tax records, it is my understanding from my notes, petitioner did not offer any evidence as to the property's appraised value at the time of the purchase. For these reasons and more, in my opinion, petitioner has not demonstrated that he has been deprived of any reasonable use of his property. He has failed to establish his burden of proof. And for that, I will be voting no on this amendment. And one last point that I do just want to make. We heard multiple times through testimony that Mr. Corey was always maintaining his property. He told us that he was a good property owner. And I'm not going to get into the allegations that were levied against them because that's neither here nor there. But what I will say is this, is that being a good neighbor and maintaining those properties is the complete opposite of what you have done, Mr. Corey. And if he's not on this call, Mr. Imperatrice, please bring this to him. By clear cutting those properties, you have destroyed even more of that area of the neighborhood. And quite frankly, I think you should be ashamed of yourself. The amount of money that you spent on clear cutting those properties could have been spent in maintaining those properties to a level of standard that we all want to see here in Newtown Township. Thank you.
Any other supervisor have any comments to add?
Well, yeah, well, John, I mean, my thoughts are that, you know, they did not prove their case, and the points that I had were already covered by you and by Leonard. I think Leonard covered just about everything there. So if you're ready, I have a motion. I don't know if the other two board members have comments before the motion.
If you'd like to.
No, I have no comment.
I don't either.
Mr. Partridge, please go for it.
Okay, my motion is to deny the validity challenge of the zoning ordinance and the proposed curative amendment filed by the Curry Group. That's my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Supervisor Partridge, seconded by Supervisor Altieri to deny the application for the Corey curative amendment requesting changes to the zoning code. Any further questions or discussions from members of the board on this item? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, which is denial, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. The curative amendment is denied. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I guess it's my duty to prepare findings of fact and conclusions of law that support the board's decision.
Okay.
And I'll get working on those.
If I may make a request, there was actually, and I'm not 100% this is the way it goes, but just to be safe, there was actually two requests. One, I believe, is to actually find that the existing zoning ordinance is invalid constitutionally. And then second was a request for a curative amendment. If I may ask, just to make it clear, if you could rule on.
Rich, I can't hear you.
I didn't hear it. I didn't hear that.
I believe Mrs. Corey is looking for a motion on the board that says that our zoning code is not invalid, that it is valid. Am I correct, Rich?
Yeah, I think yeah, it was a two-part petition. One is to find that it was constitutionally invalid. Two, to adopt a curative amendment. I think you've addressed number two. I think just for the record to be clear, it would be best to address number one. Do you find, as a board, the existing zoning is constitutionally invalid?
So Rich, the motion, let me just read this back to you, was to deny the validity challenge of the zoning ordinance.
Okay.
And the proposed curative amendment filed by the Corey Group. That was the motion.
Okay, thank you.
Covered both of those points. Covered both of those
My
points.
computer went mute twice, so, or
Yeah.
went silent twice. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think we're covered.
Board okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we're good then. That concludes the hearing on the curative amendment. And thank all the residents who are still listening for participating and adding to the discussion. We do appreciate your comments. I guess I'm surprised that Mr. Altieri didn't pick up on the comment that said that the Newtown Heights was the embodiment of the American dream for a lot of folks, since Mr. Altieri already just moved in there. So, but I'm sure he agrees.
I won't say anything else. I know Ed's getting aggravated already. Just kidding, Ed. Kidding.
No, Lynn, I think you covered all the points. Appreciate it.
3 minutes.
We are going to move on to item 19, old business, and we have nothing listed. So I'm going to
Done
move,
then, okay, guys. I'm sorry.
we're going to move on from old business.
I'm done.
You are.
Okay, thank you.
And we are on item 20, additional business. We don't have anything listed. Does any board member have any additional business to bring before the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 21, board comment. Does any board member wish to make a comment? Wow, fantastic. Okay, item 22 is public comment. These are general comments from members of the public that are listening on any item that is not on the agenda. So if you have a item for something that's not on the agenda, please raise your hand, make a comment, be heard. I still see Mrs. Furliger's hand up. Nope, I don't anymore. Okay.
No, we're unmuting her, but it means she has, because she has an older version of Zoom, is being moved over as a panelist to speak.
Okay, so we're going to let her speak then?
Well, I'm assuming she raised her hand to speak as something that's not on the agenda.
She's not there anymore.
Yeah, she's over in the panelist.
She's muted.
Yeah, Mrs. Furliger, if you're listening, if you can unmute. There you are.
There you go.
Okay, I just wanted, my daughter wanted to say something. She's here visiting, and that's why I raised my hand. I already had made my own comment.
Is this about something that's on the agenda or not on the agenda?
I wanted to make a comment. I had emailed a comment and it didn't get in, I guess, in time. And so I asked my mother to raise her hand so that I could make a comment, but you've made the ruling now. I'm happy with the ruling.
Yes,
So
thank you.
Fantastic. All right, thank you. I see no other hands up, so I'm assuming we have no further public comment. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are in adjournment. I'd like to thank everybody for participating. Our next meeting is Monday, June 8th, again via Zoom. Remind everyone to still wear your masks, maintain social distancing, have a safe.
And support our local restaurants by continue to do takeout.
Please,
For
please.
local businesses, please.
Other than that, thank you, and we will talk to you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Bye now.
Bye.
Oh, there's the mute.